I never thought my life was so interesting that it was worth telling a story, but what happened in the last year made me change my mind. My name is Noah. I'm 16 years old, and until a few months ago, my family was like any other you find in quiet residential neighborhoods. I lived with my parents on a street full of practically identical houses, with manicured lawns and dogs barking in the distance. The kind of place where neighbors exchange birthday cake and kids ride bikes until dark. But everything started to change so gradually that I only realized it when it was too late. First, it was my parents. My mother, who was always affectionate and very talkative, began to avoid any conversation beyond the basics. My father, who loved to complain about politics or soccer at dinner time, started to eat in silence with his gaze fixed on the television as if he were disconnected from the world. I thought it was just stress or something, but I soon realized that it wasn't just in my house. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Anna, who used to offer me cheese bread every time I passed by, didn't even open the door to greet me anymore. The children stopped playing in the streets, and even Mr. Alex's dog, which barked all the time, seemed to be gone. The feeling of something wrong has been growing like an experience that you can't reach. I started to pay more attention to everything around me, and the feeling of isolation only got worse. One day, returning from school, I realized that one of the houses on the street had all the windows closed, even in the middle of the afternoon. It was the Carsons' house, a family that used to be super loud, always with loud music and laughter. Now the silence was so strange that it made me stop for a few seconds to observe. It was then that I noticed something. In their garden, the lawn was dry, as if no one had watered it for weeks. It may seem silly, but there, where everyone took care of everything obsessively, it seemed like a cry for help. Arriving home, I casually asked my parents about the Carsons. My mother replied quickly, as if to change the subject. "They must be traveling, Noah. Forget about it." But the way she avoided my gaze and my father's impatient manner made me suspicious. That night I decided to do something I had never done before: spy. I climbed on the roof of the garage with a flashlight and stared at the neighboring houses, trying to find some movement. Nothing. No lights on, no shadows on the windows. Everything seemed empty. It was only when I was almost descending that I saw the shadow of a silhouette in the Carsons' backyard. I couldn't tell who it was, but the person was motionless, like a statue. It seemed like he was staring at me. My heart started beating so hard that I was afraid that someone might hear. I was paralyzed for a moment, trying to understand if this was really real. The dim light of the lantern illuminated only as far as a point, and the silhouette seemed to simply absorb the darkness around it. Without moving, I remained, waiting for some movement that could confirm that it was just one of the neighbors. But the figure didn't move either, so I carefully turned off the flashlight. When I looked back, the silhouette had disappeared. I came down from the roof so fast that I almost fell, feeling ridiculous for being scared, but at the same time, restless. The next morning, I went straight to the Carsons' backyard before heading to school. There were no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there the night before, just the dry lawn and a slight feeling that something was out of place. On the way to school, I continued to observe the other houses. Few people at the windows, and those I saw were strangely motionless, as if they were only there to fulfill a role. At school, I tried to talk to Emma, a friend who also lives in the neighborhood, but she seemed as distant as the rest of the people. She looked at me for a few seconds as if trying to remember who I was, before muttering, "It's okay, Noah, you're traveling." That left me with a knot in my stomach. It was as if no one else realized what was happening. I spent the whole day thinking about the silhouette I saw in the Carsons' backyard and Emma's strange behavior. When I got home, I found an empty house. My parents weren't there, and the garage door was open, which never happened. I went to their room to see if there was anything. The bed was unmade and some clothes had been thrown on top of it anyway. That's when I noticed a folded envelope on my mother's bedside table. I picked up the paper with trembling hands. It was a letter written in her handwriting, but it didn't seem to be something she had intended to show anyone. The beginning of the letter read how tired she was and felt that things in the neighborhood were changing. But then the sentences became more confusing, almost paranoid. "They are watching us all the time," he said in an excerpt. and concluded, "Trust no one, not even us." I dropped the letter on the bed, as if I had just touched something contaminated. What did she mean by "don't trust us"? Was he referring to her and my father? 1,000 things began to go through my head. I sat up in bed, trying to organize my thoughts, but it was when I heard footsteps in the garage that made my heart race. I went to the hallway and looked through the crack in the door that led to the floor below. My mother was standing in the driveway, holding a plastic bag full of something, but the way she was there didn't seem normal. Her shoulders seemed to be tense, and she looked around as if she was checking if she was being followed. I decided to go downstairs, pretending that nothing was wrong. "Hey, Mum, where were you?" I asked, trying to act normally. It took her a second longer than usual to respond. "We went to the market. Your father is picking things up in the car." But when I looked out the kitchen window, the car was empty. There were no bags, no sign of my father. "Oh, he must have forgotten to buy something," she corrected quickly, noticing my suspicious look. I tried to stay calm, but my heart felt like it was going to come out of my mouth. I went back to the room and locked the door, with the feeling that something bigger was happening and that somehow I was no longer part of it. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the room trying to connect the dots: the letter, the behavior of my parents, the silence in the neighborhood. It was as if everything was conspiring to isolate me. When night came, I heard footsteps in the hallway. They were slow, dragged, as if someone wanted me to know I was there. The handle of my door turned, but it was locked. "Noah, open the door." It was my mother, but her voice sounded different. There was a lack of emotion, almost as if it was a robot trying to imitate his voice. I didn't answer. I held my breath until the footsteps moved away. That dawn was the longest of my life. I stayed awake with a backpack ready in case I needed to run. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something downstairs, a strange movement, as if the furniture was being dragged. I opened the door slowly and went down the steps without making a sound, with my legs shaking. When I got to the room, I saw my parents standing in the middle of it, with their backs to me. They were motionless, staring at something on the ground that I couldn't see from where I was. "What are you doing?" My voice came out louder than I expected, but they didn't move. I took a deep breath and moved closer, with each step feeling like an eternity. When I got close enough, I saw what they were looking at: a hole in the floor, where the living room carpet used to be. It was a hole that looked deep with jagged edges, as if it had been dug in a hurry. There was something inside, but the dim light in the room couldn't tell what it was. My parents continued to stand still, breathing heavily. It was only then that I realized that they were holding something in their hands. My father had a shovel, and my mother, something that looked like a rolled-up bag, big enough to... No, I didn't want to finish that thought. "You guys, what is this?" My voice came out shaky. My mother finally turned to me, and what I saw in her eyes was not tiredness nor sadness. It was something empty, without emotion, as if she were someone else. "Noah, you shouldn't be here," she said in a low, controlled voice, but in a tone that gave me goosebumps. My father didn't say anything, but he stepped forward, blocking the hole as if to prevent me from seeing more. Adrenaline got the best of me, and without thinking, I ran to the kitchen, locking the door behind me. In the kitchen, I hid behind the desk, trying to hear what they were doing. Everything was silent for a few seconds until I heard footsteps coming towards me. The handle spun slowly, and the dry sound of the locked latch echoed through the kitchen. "Noah, open the door, it's not what you're thinking," my mum said on the other end. But again, there was something wrong in the tone of her voice, almost as if she were reading a script. I stood still, holding a knife I grabbed from the countertop. "I just want to talk," she insisted, but I couldn't believe a word. The footsteps moved away again, and I heard the muffled sound of voices. I went up to the attic by a ladder that was suspended in the corner of the kitchen. Upstairs, I found dust, old boxes, and a small window that overlooked the street. I peeked, trying to understand what was happening outside. The sight made me even more uncomfortable. Several people, including neighbors I hadn't seen in weeks, were leaving their homes, walking somewhere down the street. Everyone moved slowly, as if hypnotized. As I watched out the window, I felt a shiver run through my entire body. The scene outside seemed surreal. The people, usually so expressive and full of life, walked like dolls. No one talked, no one looked around. It was as if they were being pulled by an invisible force. It was then that I noticed something even stranger. Some of the people were carrying bags, like the one my mother was holding, and they were all walking in the same direction, to a vacant lot at the end of the street, where nothing ever happened. I was so absorbed by what I saw that I almost didn't notice the footsteps in the attic. My heart raced, and I turned around in time to see my father climbing the stairs. He didn't seem furious or worried as I expected. He just stared at me, his eyes fixed and a barely perceptible but cold smile. "Noah, it's time for you to understand," he said, as he calmly climbed up, blocking my only exit. I prepared to defend myself, holding the knife tighter, but he didn't seem intimidated at all. "You've always been so curious, maybe it's time for you to join us." I retreated to the window, almost tripping over one of the boxes scattered on the floor. My father kept moving forward, each step calculated, as if he knew I had nowhere to run. "Join? What are you talking about?" I shouted, my voice breaking. He didn't answer right away, just tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing the moment. "This is bigger than you think, son. Bigger than any of us. Resisting will only make things more difficult." The way he spoke, so calmly, made me feel a knot in my stomach. It was as if he was no longer the man I knew. I looked out the window again, desperate for a solution. People were still walking into the vacant lot, but now there was something else. A dim, flickering light emanating from the place, like a distant fire. The feeling that it was all wrong intensified, almost suffocating. "What did you do? Why is this happening?" he wanted, trying to buy time. He gave a faint smile, but his eyes were empty. "We are just fulfilling our role. And now it's your turn." Before I could think of anything else, he advanced towards me. He held my arm with a force that didn't seem human, immobilizing me easily. "Calm down, son. This doesn't have to be painful," he said, with a serenity that terrified me even more. I fought with all my might to free myself, but it was useless. He seemed much stronger than usual, as if he was moved by something beyond himself. It was then that the light from the vacant lot came through the window, more intense, projecting a strange glow on both of us. His skin seemed almost translucent in that light, revealing veins that pulsed in shades of red and blue. "You don't understand now, but you will soon," he muttered, as he tried to drag me to the stairs. I screamed for my mother, but she didn't answer. There was only the muffled sound of the voices outside and the constant rustling of light, which now seemed alive, pulsating. In a desperate move, I managed to kick one of the wooden boxes that were near the stairs in the attic. She fell down the stairs, making a noise loud enough that for a few seconds he let go of my arm. I took the opportunity to run down the stairs, down the side, and out the kitchen door. My only thought was to get to the wasteland and find out what was going on. I ran down the street, the cold pre-dawn air cutting my face. Up ahead, the light of the vacant lot pulsed as if it had its own rhythm, almost mesmerizing. People were gathered in circles and motionless. My heart was beating so hard, it seemed to echo in my ears. But I kept moving forward, even though I didn't know what I would do when I got there. When I was a few meters away, I realized that there was something in the middle of the circle. A structure, perhaps? It was not possible to identify for sure, because the light seemed to distort everything around, making it impossible to focus on the details. As soon as I got closer, I saw my parents in the crowd. They were side by side, but their eyes did not see me. It was as if they were no longer there, as if they were just puppets. In the center of the light, something moves. It was not human. It wasn't something I could describe, as if my mind just couldn't process what it saw. It was something wrong, impossible, pulsating, but it seemed to command everything there. I felt an urge to run, but my feet were stuck to the ground, as if I was just another bizarre ritual at that moment. It was then that I heard a voice, not with my ears, but inside my head. "Now you understand, there's nowhere to go." And that's how I woke up from a 2-month coma.